There was a man who had 3 sons, and the youngest was considered very silly. He would often do things that didn't make sense, and his brothers would tease him mercilessly. The eldest son, who was the most serious and responsible of the 3, would often try to correct his younger brother's behavior, but it seemed like no matter what he did, the youngest son would just continue to act silly. The second son, who was a bit of a jokester, would often join in on the teasing, and the 3 of them would spend hours making fun of the youngest son. The father would try to intervene, but it seemed like no matter what he did, the teasing would continue. One day, the eldest son decided that he had had enough of his brother's antics. He decided to go into the forest to cut some wood, hoping to get away from the constant teasing and find some peace. As he entered the forest, he met a grey old man who greeted him and asked for a piece of cake and a drop of wine. The old man explained that he was very hungry and thirsty, and that he had been walking for hours. The eldest son, who was feeling a bit generous, offered to share his cake and wine with the old man. But then he thought better of it, and decided that he didn't want to share his food and drink with a stranger. He told the old man that he was sorry, but he couldn't spare any of his provisions. The old man looked at the eldest son with a sad expression and said, "I understand. I will just have to continue on my journey without your help." The eldest son nodded, and the old man continued on his way. As the eldest son began to cut down a tree, he noticed that the old man was watching him from a distance. He felt a bit uneasy, but he continued to work, trying to focus on the task at hand. But as he swung his axe, he made a mistake, and it slipped out of his hand, cutting his arm badly. The eldest son cried out in pain, and the old man rushed over to help him. He examined the wound and then began to clean and bandage it. The eldest son was in a lot of pain, and he couldn't believe what had happened. He had been so careless, and now he was paying the price. The old man looked at him with a serious expression and said, "You should have shared your cake and wine with me. If you had, I would have been able to help you avoid this accident, but now you will have to go home and get treatment for your wound." The eldest son was shocked and ashamed. He had never thought that his decision not to share his food and drink would have such consequences. He thanked the old man for his help and promised to be more careful in the future. As he made his way back home, the eldest son couldn't help but think about the old man's words. He realized that he had been so focused on his own needs and desires that he had forgotten about the needs of others. He felt a sense of regret and remorse, and he knew that he had to make a change. When he arrived home, his father and brothers were shocked to see the state of his arm. They immediately took him to see the village healer, who treated his wound and told him that he would need to rest for several days to recover. The eldest son was grateful for the healer's help, and he knew that he had learned a valuable lesson. He realized that sharing and kindness were important, and that his decision not to share his cake and wine with the old man had almost cost him dearly. As he lay in bed, recovering from his injury, the eldest son thought about his brothers and their constant teasing. He realized that they were not just being mean, but were actually trying to get a reaction out of him. He decided that he would try to be more understanding and patient with them, and to see if he could find a way to stop the teasing. The youngest son, who had been watching his brother's injury with concern, approached him and asked if he was okay. The eldest son smiled and said, "I'm okay, little brother. I just learned a valuable lesson. I realized that sharing and kindness are important, and that I should have shared my cake and wine with the old man." The youngest son looked at his brother with a curious expression and said, "I don't understand. Why did you not share your cake and wine with the old man?" The eldest son thought for a moment, and then said, "I was being selfish and I didn't think about the old man's needs. But I learned that sharing and kindness are important, and I will try to be more thoughtful in the future." The youngest son nodded and said, "I'm glad you learned that lesson, big brother. I will try to be more thoughtful too." The second son, who had been watching the conversation, chuckled and said, "I think we all need to learn that lesson. Let's try to be more kind and understanding with each other and with others." The three brothers nodded in agreement, and from that day on, they made an effort to be more thoughtful and kind towards each other. They learned that sharing and kindness were important, and that they could make a big difference in the lives of those around them. As for the old man, he continued on his journey, but he never forgot the eldest son and the lesson he had learned. He would often think about the young man and his brothers, and the importance of sharing and kindness. And whenever he met someone in need, he would remember the eldest son's mistake and try to help them in any way he could. As the eldest son recovered from his injury, he began to reflect on the lesson he had learned. He realized that his decision not to share his cake and wine with the old man had almost cost him dearly, and he was grateful that the old man had been able to help him, despite his initial refusal. The eldest son also began to think about his brothers and their constant teasing. He realized that they were not just being mean, but were actually trying to get a reaction out of him. He decided that he would try to be more understanding and patient with them, and to see if he could find a way to stop the teasing. One day, the eldest son approached his brothers and said, "I've been thinking a lot about our behavior towards each other, and I've come to realize that we've been treating each other poorly. I want to try to change that. I want us to be kind and understanding towards each other, and to support each other instead of teasing each other." The youngest son looked at his brother with surprise and said, "Really? You're going to try to stop teasing me?" The eldest son nodded and said, "Yes, I am. I realize that I've been just as guilty of teasing you as you have been of teasing me, but I want to change that. I want us to be a team and to support each other instead of tearing each other down." The second son looked at his brothers with a thoughtful expression and said, "I think that's a great idea. I've been feeling a bit guilty about teasing you too, little brother. I didn't realize how much it was hurting you." The youngest son smiled and said, "It's okay, big brother. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but I'm glad you're willing to stop teasing me. Let's try to be kind to each other from now on." The three brothers nodded in agreement, and from that day on, they made an effort to be kind and understanding towards each other. They learned to support each other and to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. As they worked together, they began to notice that their relationships with each other were improving. They were more patient, understanding, and they were able to communicate more effectively. They were no longer just brothers, but friends. The eldest son also began to think about the old man and the lesson he had learned from him. He realized that the old man had been trying to teach him a valuable lesson, and that he had almost missed it. He decided that he would make it a point to be more kind and generous in the future, and to always be willing to help those in need. As the years went by, the eldest son became known throughout the village as a kind and generous person. He was always willing to lend a helping hand, and he was loved and respected by all who knew him. And he never forgot the lesson he had learned from the old man, and the importance of sharing and kindness. The story of the eldest son and the old man was passed down from generation to generation, and it served as a reminder to always be kind and generous to others. And the three brothers, who had once been so mean and teasing, became the best of friends and lived happily ever after.
Please subscribe to my channel Lessons of Life and press the bell notification icon.